So here we go. Welcome to Historican, where we tell stories behind the stories, rooted in resistance, history, and the voices of our people. I'm your host today, Jessica, and today's episode is called Yo Soy Boricua Pa Que Tu Lo Sepas. But where is home? Everybody's heard that, especially with the Puerto Rican parade happening recently. So definitely that Puerto Rican pride has been on an all-time high. But we want to dissect a little bit today about really what does that mean, especially for those of us who weren't born on the island. The goal of the Historican podcast is really to dig into the diaspora and looking at those people, those key individuals in our culture that supported all of the grassroots movements on the island and here in the States, in New York particularly, and to just really see what's all the work that's gone into pushing our causes, getting our culture and our movements across, and also the work that's still happening today. So this is just the first of many opportunities for us to dig deeper into our culture in our goal to educate ourselves and build community and continue to support and educate and grow each other. For Puerto Ricans in the diaspora, identity isn't just about where we're from. It's who we are. It's rooted in how we carry our culture across generations and how we stay rooted in that culture, even if we're far away from our homeland. So today we want to take some time to talk about that feeling of longing, that feeling of sometimes disconnect, but also that deep-rooted feeling of pride that it seems like we all have, no matter where we were born and where we're continuing to grow ourselves. We're going to unpack a little bit what it means to claim that Puerto Rican identity while growing up outside the island, and also how we make sense of home when it's more than, where we've been, but just kind of like memories and sometimes piecing those puzzle pieces together from what we've learned and what's been handed down to us from our elders and other key figures in our communities and in our families. So again, today, we don't do this alone. We have our crew here. So we have Joseph, Bowie, and Vanessa, and myself. Again, Jessica, we're going to be unpacking this deep conversation today. And so I wanted to put out there first this question. When we say Yo Soy Boricua, what is it that we're actually saying? What does that mean to us individually when we claim that? Even though we all are individuals that have been born outside of Puerto Rico.
Well, for me, I would say it's more than just ancestry, right? It's like affirming a deep cultural identity. It lives inside of me. It lives inside of us, no matter where we're raised. It's history, resilience, spirit, the spirit of our people that we carry inside, even when we're not on the island. And especially for those of us in the diaspora, it's saying Yo Soy Boricua. It's like an act of belonging, a way to stay connected to a place that shaped us, even if we weren't born there.
I would say
go ahead, Joseph.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's also a declaration to the world of who we are.
Definitely.
Right? Especially because, with our history, they've tried to erase us, right? They've tried, as from the indigenous people on the island, Tainos and stuff, and the genocide that they experienced, and then just the mixture of who we are, right? The Spanish, Taino, African, all that. So when we come out and say Yo Soy Boricua, this is, we're making a declaration. This is who we are. This is what we're about.
What I hear you, what resonates with when you say that is the blending of, even in that statement, Yo soy Boricua, pa que tú lo sepa. It's Spanish, it's Taino, and it's so there's a street, there's a attitude and a energy behind it. In that just statement alone, there's a blending that just speaks to who we are. We are a blend. We are a several paths met and screaming out who we are from that path. When I heard that, the Yo soy Boricua, it was a sentence that I held firmly as identity before I even knew what it actually meant. Because behind what is Boricua, because if someone had pressed me when I first said the statement, just said, well, what does that mean? And what is Boricua? And
It
what you're
sounds
actually
cool.
saying, I'd be like, well, it's gonna be a hodgepodge of things that I had to come to evolve to understand, you know. And it was a surface statement at the beginning, but then even today, still keeps growing in its depth for
Evolve.
I understand what it means for
Yeah.
me.
But I love that it also it moves away from the concept of Hispanic or Latino, because it takes us out of this, putting all of us in the same category. And it's like, no, this is who we are. We're not just that. We're way beyond that.
Right. I like what you said, Joseph, about it being a declaration, because I feel like it's exactly that. Because when you hear us say it, it's not like, oh, yo soy boricua. It's a exclamation, yo soy boricua, right? It's like everyone says it, and it's just the pride and the elevation of just like energy automatically shoots up. So it is a declaration. And it's that specificity that, this is particular to us, right? And it's not because like what you're saying, Vanessa, about like this big umbrella term of like Hispanic or even Latino, Latinidad. Yes, that is an overarching category, but at the same time, everyone has their nuances, everyone has their specific history and cultural identity. So I think with that declaration of yo soy boricua pa que tú lo sepa, it's like saying it with pride, but also I like to take it almost as like a challenge to make you want to know more, right? Because it's like, oh, so, just like Joey's saying, like I was claiming it and I didn't really know exactly like the deeper levels of it. I think as we all did as kids, I know I was chanting it at the parade at like 10, and, I definitely was not digging deep into my culture at that time, at least not, consciously. So I think it's both of those aspects to it, right? That declaration, that designation.
And as much as it is a declaration, it's also a calling out to the rest of the tribe, because that it's a two-part. Like, it's a call and response. It's our African heritage. I want to hear. There's an expected response. I want to know where the rest of my people are when I say "Yo soy boricua." There's a echo of "Pa que tú lo sepas."
That's true. Yeah.
Yep. And I think that from people who are outside looking in, right? Like when they look at Puerto Ricans too, there's people who say, "Oh, you guys are always with the flags and always so much pride and all that stuff." And I feel like with this podcast, we can show the reason why behind that, because of the struggle that we've come through, the struggle for identity, which we're going to talk about in here, the struggle of our independence, like whether on the island or even here, like, again, Yo Soy Boricua, it's declarative and it's unapologetic as well. But for this podcast, we can talk about why is that? That's what
I love that.
wonder.
I love that you connected that opportunity to say, well, what is it? It's not just what is it, what Boricua, and what is it that we would like you to know and know more of? It's an opportunity and a calling at the same time. I like that.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of tags into another, aspect of this that we were kind of unpacking, is that, okay, so we state it, we claim, we're energetic about it, we're putting the term out there, but like, do you get pushback? Have you felt instances of pushback where people are like, well, are you really Puerto Rican? Are you really Boricua? Are you Boricua enough? Because of the fact, like, again, none of us were born on the island. So it's like kind of like that dissonance. Have you felt that?
Absolutely.
Hard to even ouch, yes.
Like affirmative, yes, okay.
Yeah. I hear it all the time. You don't look Puerto Rican. You don't sound Puerto Rican.
Right.
What is that supposed to look and sound like?
I didn't until what's most clear to me is the times I left my home community and went to other places where it got so thrown in my face. I immediately think of going away to prep school and people being like, "You're what?" Like they didn't even understand what a Puerto Rican was. And then I was in a position where just saying that I wasn't enough. It had to be, there's explanation behind it, right? And then being, moving and traveling in life brings you to different places. I wound up in Western Mass, and not a lot of Boricuas out here, and then you find out just how much you are brown and just how much you need to explain it when you're not amongst people. Because when I was carrying the flag and screaming "Pa que tú lo sepa" with the rest of us, we never questioned each other's identity or inness to the group, right? Never had to prove it to each other. But those were hard.
I feel for myself,
That-
growing up in the Bronx, I definitely had to. I did feel like I needed to prove myself almost because I looked like some white boy and stuff, which I'm half a quarter Irish, a quarter Italian, Puerto Rican though, and grew up in a Puerto Rican household as well. And I remember even as a kid, going with my aunt and uncle, we used to sell Puerto Rican flags around the time of the Puerto Rican Day parade, and I get asked like, "Are you really Puerto Rican?" Like, you know,
It's a business opportunity.
yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking to expand my portfolio and just share it, selling these flags. So I think it was, again, that getting back to that whole phrase, "Yo soy boricua." It was my own, like for my own identity and me declaring for myself and speaking up for myself, like this is who I am, and making no apologies about it.
Until I realized that my early understandings of what that meant was just caught up in all the trappings of stereotypes, I really did not care to understand more of what it meant, honestly. Like, "Pa que tú lo sepa," like, I was more Boricua than you thought when I hadn't even read a page of history, right? It's because I was breakdancing, I was writing graffiti, I was doing all the things that every other Boricua little boy around me was doing. Speaking Spanglish, half so all the little things that sort of put together a package of what seemed like a Boricua. So I didn't have that same challenge of the question of what you look like. Everything you from 3 miles away, you're like, yep, that's a little Puerto Rican b-boy right there. But what that was surface. It's been and still is a journey to unpack
Right.
and prove to myself and now my three boys. Am I Boricua? And what does that mean when we have visited the islands myself once and my boys haven't yet, right? So
Or
And
what
I,
about when you're coming across our elders who, like, whether it's in family, or people who were born on the island and how they could talk to us and how they.
well,
Right, sorry, Vanessa.
no, I was gonna say I have a bit of a unique, I think, life experience in that I was born here. I was born in Harlem, but my parents went back to Puerto Rico. So when I was 7 or 8, we went back and lived in Puerto Rico. So me, I was, English was my first language, and now I am in Puerto Rico, living there in school. There, I was La Americana. So that was, I think, the first time I felt like, oh, wait a minute, what? Like I was Puerto Rican always up until this point, and now I'm La Americana. And then I had to prove myself in a way that I was Puerto Rican enough to live there. And yeah, I think that for me was the hardest.
that's fascinating to go back to PR and
Yeah, it's that whole kind of like immersion in reverse because we don't talk about that. We
mm,
definitely don't talk about that. It's usually the experience of coming from the island and coming to, the States or coming to New York specifically. But yeah, that's like a whole different nuance there. I think like for me, and hearing what everybody's saying, I think like I didn't not feel Boricua as a young kid because of the fact like we're immersed in it in our homes, right? So it's like, with my mom and dad and aunts and uncles, grandparents, it's like, you're immersed in the food, you're immersed in the culture, you're hearing the stories, abuelo and abuela talking about, the island and growing up there. My dad was born and raised in Puerto Rico. My mom not. She was born and raised in Spanish Harlem. But still, it's like the stories were consistent. You're getting the immersion and the energy from the family. So I don't feel like I felt other until I was going into like middle school, specifically high school, because I went to a predominantly white high school. Could claim it that way. Definitely was not, Black and Latino students were not the majority there. And so it was the first time where now I'm paying more attention to um, how I look like, how I sound like, And also even my last name, in ignorance, because I hadn't met anybody else that had the last name Diaz. I was like, is my last name Latino enough? Like, it was almost like now I wanted to really make sure that people knew, hey, I'm Latina, I'm Puerto Rican. Maybe you don't notice it from my visual look, because like you, Joseph, sometimes I was getting pegged as different things or a bunch of different things, and nothing wrong with other cultures, obviously, or being of mixed heritage. But it was almost like I was getting upset because I was like, what? Like, why cannot, people automatically connect me to being Puerto Rican? And then it almost like started to build that doubt. Also, Spanish was not my first language. It wasn't something that I had to use on a regular basis. My receptive understanding definitely developed a lot faster and a lot better compared to my expressive, because I wasn't having to use it all the time. I would hear my dad speak Spanish and my mom respond in English. That was just like their dynamic. And then the only time I really had to listen to full on Spanish conversations and try to chime in or respond was with my grandparents. So I wasn't having to exercise it all the time. So then it's like it, became one of those things where it's like, okay, so to prove that I'm, Boricua, to prove that I'm Puerto Rican, does my last name have to be a certain one? Do I have to look a certain way? And do I have to speak Spanish? To some extent, and it became kind of like the scrutiny, but I did know at that time that I was like, I want people to know who I am. And so it just seemed kind of like that pivotal stage, you're getting into young adulthood, very close to it. And it was just like, it became more and more important for me to be identified as who I am, right? And who I see myself to be. And I think that's kind of been the exploration ever since, right? That's why we're here, to kind of dig in deeper. And, not every Boricua's experience is the same. So really kind of unpacking what are the life experiences, the cultural experiences, the familial roots and experiences that, connect us all, but also, the unique aspects of it doesn't make you any less Boricua, right? So it's just kind of crazy how that comes up, where you feel like you have to prove, justify, you have a little ID card, be like, look, I'm official, I'm like, what are we doing?
I got a drop of blood on me. Look at my ancestry.com. It says it.
Like, come on. I'm like, really? I'm not gonna lie, but this is more so kind of like just in homage and respect to my dad, and me trying to connect more to my roots with him, because we had a bit of a fractured relationship at certain times. I heard, and I don't know if you guys heard about this, that if you have one or both parents were born in Puerto Rico, that you can get a Puerto Rican citizenship, that there's actually a document that states you're a Puerto Rican citizen. Or if you move to Puerto Rico and have proof that you live there, I forget XYZ how many years, that you can also file for this Puerto Rican citizenship. So it's a specific document that says you're a Puerto Rican citizen. And then the power in that as well, because of the fact that we were connected to Spain, it can help you get a Spanish passport, which a Spanish passport, I think, is considered the most powerful one in the world, to give you access, all throughout the globe and Europe specifically. So, as someone who likes to travel, as someone who, definitely wants to explore and, just traverse and get connected as much as I can. And also that aspect of like, I don't know if it's proof, since we just finished that conversation about proving it, but there's something about it that makes me feel good in wanting to get it. Like,
Right.
I feel like it's a connection to my father.
We are.
Like, literally, I found it on IG, and especially Vanessa with you because you lived there physically. You were there,
Yeah.
so that it could be any of like your personal records. I think like maybe like school records or something. Like for me, I had to find my dad's birth certificate so that it proves that my dad was born there, so that I can use that to get the Puerto Rican citizenship. And again, I think it's a way to connect me more with my dad and just to learn more about his experiences. But also I think just like with the way everything's going right now in our country, the US, that it's very important, at least for me, I think I'm in that place again where I need you to know who I am.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of me trying to find that rootedness, and also make it very clear. Like that's my way of saying yo soy boricua pa que tú lo sepas, like to kind of shout it out at people. But yeah, just a fun fact I heard about. So if I do it, I'll let you guys know. If you do it first, you let me know.
Okay. Yeah.
Something I wanted to touch on though, Jessica, what you're saying, when you just said about I need to let you know who I am, I think also is like I need to let myself also know who I am. And kind of going back to what Joey was saying about, years ago, Yo Soy Boricua meant something different then than it does now, and how that's evolved. And for myself is like, because I know that, where I felt like I wasn't Puerto Rican enough, or I didn't know Spanish, like people like would be like, oh, you don't even know Spanish, whatever. Well, yeah. Or when I have, good conversation with good people, I'm like, well, my father was an alcoholic when I was a kid. I didn't really learn, he was a lot of times at the bar, so he really didn't teach me how to speak Spanish or whatever. Not to put a negative light on him, he turned his life around, whatever. With that feeling of not feeling Puerto Rican enough, it drove me to want to learn the history of what it is to be a Puerto Rican, history of the island. And that, as I've done research and read books and engulf myself and all that stuff, it's helped me to build more a sense of myself, especially because I also didn't know a lot of my family history on my father's side. See, it was real small within my father's household, but I come to find out that there's such a big tribe that I had out there from my father's mother's side and his father's side. So so like with me again, reading and participating in things like this, it's helped me to know more of myself and who I am and my identity as a Puerto Rican.
It's not a destination. We're not there. We're on a path towards a place.
Right. Exactly. I was going to throw out there another common phrase that I know we've all heard is like, que no soy ni de aquí ni de allá. Right. So again, further digging into that feeling of like, I don't belong in either space, or I'm torn as to, what am I connected to? Can I be connected to both aspects of my reality equally? Just I wanted to have a moment for us to kind of dig into that too. Like, how does it, how is that in between space impacting who we are, impacting how we self-identify, and what's the tension with that?
I want to take a risk at opening that can and then leaving it open with a group of people I trust, right? So I have a parallel experience with that phrase, ni de aquí ni de allá, because it's not just the cultural context of being a Boricua outside of the island, in the accepted part of the Bronx, which is like the extended island, right? So South Bronx is almost extended Boricua, right? So it's still part of the island-ish, but I also left that place to go to prep school. And it was that parallel experience of being, I'm not supposed to be in this prep school, nor am I supposed to be brown at this prep school. And I'm not supposed to survive this by definition. So all conversation, interaction, expectation, passive aggressive, non-said things were all like, you're not supposed to be here, so you have to prove that you should be here at every corner. And it was parallel. It wasn't just that I had the academic chops to be there. but it's also like I'm a Latino, and there was only like two other kids of color, and they were both black. So they're like, "What are Latinos? What are y'all? Well, you represent every little piece of anything Hispanic we understand." And I'm like, so how do I hold on to an identity that I couldn't even speak more of? Because I'm like, what would it mean if I walk into as a 13-year-old saying I write graffiti, I break dance, I listen to Rocksteady Crew, like that? That is not Boricua, and that's all they saw, and it's all at that time I had to offer. I speak some Spanish, I eat these things, and my mom looks like this, and we do these things on weekends, and we cook a lot of pasteles. Like, I had to try to figure out how to make what I had loose strings of 10% of all these stereotypes. There's a truth in it. So find the truth with all these things and then own it and then say it and prove it at the same time, which is impossible for any young person to do with their own just simple identity of growing up from younghood to adulthood, but also just trying to do it within a context where every piece of your cultural identity is questioned and you don't even have answers for yourself. And then go back home every other weekend to be in the Bronx with my boys, and they're like, "Nah, you ain't from here. You some prep school kid." I'm like, "Oh man, I don't belong nowhere.
Right.
Mm.
What the hell am I? And where do I belong?" It's defined almost every single decision I've made and will make is the who am I and how do I hold on to it and bring
And
it.
that's Puerto Rican history, though, right? Like because of our complex identity. Who are we? Like who? The Taino, African, Spanish, whatever. Who are we? Like and in relation to even our the status of the island, right? It's a colony, pretty much. It doesn't have its own independence because we've from whether it was Spain being ruled by Spain to then just being taken over by America with no questions towards people on the island. Hey, do you want to be under this rulership? Like, no, it was just so it's like who? So that's our history, and that's what we're constantly fighting with and trying to discover and trying to proclaim. Going back again, Yo soy Boricua. What am I? Like this is who I am, and fighting for that. It's a fight within ourselves, with amongst each other, unfortunately, and with the world.
Bringing it back to the Nidiaki, like Joy, you were talking about like the prep school thing, and I get that because I grew up in the Bronx, and going up and down Fordham Road, going to Alexander's. There was always, those ivy walls at Fordham, and so I remember always wanting to like be on the other side of it because you could never see on it. And then I decided that's where I'm going to go to college. And so when I got accepted, to my dismay, there were no Latinos in there, and I was
They're only on the outside.
yeah, only on the outside, nobody here. I was literally one of two Puerto Ricans who lived on campus. One of two.
There must have been culture shock in the
It
Bronx.
was
In the
so
Bronx, that's bananas.
in the Bronx. Like if I walk outside of these gates, I am home. I am, the Bronx. My abuela and abuelo live here. Like this was something I could not wrap my head around. And yeah, I definitely felt the same that you felt, Joey, because it was weird. It was just weird. And yes, constantly proving yourself was the thing.
I'm like, this is a common theme right now because I was mentioning a little bit in relation to high school. I went to Bronx Science, which is smack in the middle of the Bronx. And if you're a Bronx kid enrolled there, it's like a shock, right? So it's like the school has predominantly kids coming from Queens, Brooklyn, even Staten Island, but nobody from the Bronx. So it's like to be a Bronx kid there, and then on top of that, Puerto Rican, Latina, our population was very small. So it was like I wasn't one of two. I think that might have like thrown me over the edge. I might have not have made it the 4 years. But I went in there with two friends of mine who actually got into, and we developed cliques right away, because it's like we needed to see ourselves. We needed people to understand, and also to help us navigate that space, because now we're in a space that, has a lot of different things that we've never experienced, right? And this could branch out into a whole nother conversation for another day around, educational inequities. And, once you get your foot into certain spaces that people may not have expected you to get into, then the next level of struggle, which is not only navigating like, hey, this is who I am, I deserve to be here fully in and of myself, but also, now what are the tools and the skills and the strategies and everything that I haven't had access to, that now I need to pick up from somewhere in order to be able to compete, right, and be viable. But that's a conversation for another day. But definitely feeling that is just like, where am I? And, do I really belong here? Or am I being analyzed all the time? And I like what you said, Joey, about just like kind of opening the can and leaving it open, because I think, and maybe, hopefully our continued conversations will help, get that feeling across and people really internalize it, that yes, as Boricuas, I feel that there is a common thread, right? Like there's something that we all share, regardless if you were born on the island versus you migrated to the States from the island at a certain point, or even like Vanessa's journey being here and then going back and then coming back and having, that kind of dual frame of reference. But there's definitely a common thread that we all share. But with the differences, because of the diaspora, because of all of this migration and the movements and the different things we've had to deal with socially, economically, politically, there's going to be differences, there's going to be uniqueness. And I think we just need to embrace it as a part of the culture overall, right? Again, like you were saying, Joseph, we are historically that blend of Taino, African, Spanish, European. So all of that, blend, that's all unique in and of itself. There's so many things in that stew pot. So why would it change? Why would it be any different? Especially when you start looking at, the historical aspects that happen on the island in and of itself, that continue to add to the uniqueness, to the differences, the distinctions. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? I think that's something we get very stuck on, that because it doesn't fit the mold and not everything looks that same way or everything acts that same way, sounds that same way, that automatically it's other and it's bad and it's not authentic. And I think, part of what makes being Boricua authentic is that common thread with the unique diversity. That goes everything from the language piece to, just how we look physically and, our backgrounds. Because we're everywhere. We are everywhere. That's something that cannot be denied. You can go anywhere on this planet. You're going to find a Boricua somewhere. You're going to find us somewhere. We're all over.
Pa que lo sepa.
Exactly.
You're gonna know. Yeah, you're gonna know that you were right.
Just yell, yo soy boricua, and you hear,
Right, you're going to hear yes. People, yeah. When you ask, they're going to find you. You're going to
Just
it's
got
maybe
like that.
you have to, with the can being open, just don't want to cut you off. Just that place of where you're from, having you settled that I'm from where I'm from right here. I'm from where I am right now, right? Home is in me. I bring Boricua Central is inside of me. I bring it with me where I go. And I keep put more stuff in that baggage. I'm growing a little island inside of me, right? So it's with me. I don't have to prove to you or anyone else. There's only 3 people I do have to prove it to, my 3 boys, right? And that's that's for another segment, possibly somewhere in this one, around the passing on of the package we're still completing.
Yeah. The legacy.
Something I wanted to touch on. Yeah, I wanted to touch back of what you were saying about it being a good thing about the differences and the complexities, because like I think that's kind of also a reason why we're doing this podcast, knowing all the differences. There's different problems on the island than there is in the diaspora. We have different backgrounds, different upbringings and stuff, but there's beauty in that, and it can unite us. It doesn't have to divide us anymore. Um, Within ourselves as well, like realizing within ourselves, like, I don't need to battle this or whatever. This is who I am, and just embracing that. Um, and then with each other as a community, because again, like I just think, when we start seeing differences, we divide more than we come together, especially like people of color. It's like, why do we do that? They don't do that in other groups. Why can't we all, as Puerto Ricans, we're together in this? And that's, again, with talking about Puerto Rican history, whether you're talking about history on the island and history here in the diaspora, there's definitely a connection, because many people, figures from the island, prominent figures, they did work here in the diaspora, whether it was the Puerto Rican nationalists, whether it's Julio de Burgos and many more people. So there is, like, I want us to highlight that so it can show the common thread and the unity that we can have.
I think also connecting to that common thread you're saying, even within our families, and I wanted to, we each kind of started to talk a little bit about, where we sometimes felt as other, and when, kind of realizing, okay, I'm Boricua, what does that mean? Or I'm identifying, with this term, what does that mean for me? But, our families are very integral, I think, in, connecting us to the culture, whether they were born here or whether they were on the island and then migrated here to the States, or, whatever their journey was. But I feel that for each of us, there's definitely a story there of how, our families, our lineage, again, taking it back to that journey and how it connects to us and how it's helping us actively. Because I think we all said we're still going through that process of, further understanding and unpacking our Boricuaness and, that identity. So, I wanted to give us also an opportunity to take it back and talk a little bit about our family's journeys. Where did, the legacy begin, and how did it get us to where we are right now?
That's the start.
Open space.
I guess I'll talk a little bit. I guess, my father, he was born in Ponce, and he was born in 1940, so he's way back there. And the family tells me that they migrated probably in 48, late 40s or early 50s, one of those prominent waves of migration from the island to over here. And they came and they were living at first in Delancey, then, migrated different places and wound up in the Bronx and stuff. So yeah, that was kind of, my, I guess, my roots from my father and stuff. And now that because my father passed away last year, and I recently connected with many of his cousins from his mother's side, which was the Escobar side of the family, and they've been sharing stories with me, and it's beautiful to hear, as something like, they all stuck together. They were even moving into the city, and if you got into a fight with one of them, you had to fight everybody. They all get involved and stuff like that. So
the whole crew come running down the block. Right. Yeah.
And like I said earlier, like, I didn't know a lot of my history because, when I lived with my father, I lived with my mom initially, then I moved with my father. And in my father's household, it was my grandfather's home. My aunt lived there. My uncle lived there. So, I mean, it was like a small little group, but it wasn't big, like, I guess a stereotypical Puerto Rican family. But as I've gotten older and I've learned more history, I'm like, man, there's huge, like, I've been doing my family tree for the last many years, and it's like hundreds of people that I've been able to, connect and say, wow, I got all this family and stuff. And then as I've said, like, I've done a lot of research on history, and I've been able to connect some dots, and found out about the Ponce massacre, and I found out my grandfather was there that day. I found out I may have, some kind of ties to Pedro Albizu Campos, who may be related through marriage and stuff. So, like, that's, yeah, I love that's why I love reading up on history, and then just, again, gives me a stronger sense of myself, and then learning my family history as well.
That's reminding me of that show. What's that show? Do you know the name? That they sit down with stars and celebrities and they unpack their whole
Oh yeah,
whole historical
Ancestry.
journey. Yeah. I'm forgetting the
love
name
that
of the
show.
show, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's it. It's like, oh my God, I wish I could do that. I wish you could tell me all the tea. Like, who am I related to? That's very
Yeah.
cool.
All right.
Anyone else want to share a little bit?
I'll share a little bit. Both my parents were born in Puerto Rico. My dad came, I think he was probably like right out of high school when he came. And he was born in 1947, so probably was like the late 50s. My mom came. Okay, let me go back a little bit. The first person that I know that came is my grandmother. My grandmother came, and she ended up in Harlem. Working in the textiles and cleaning houses and doing whatever she could, because at that time when she came, she had already had my mom, and she was a single mom. So she left my mom with her parents in Puerto Rico, and they raised her so she would send money. And so she was the first in our family to come to New York in the 50s. And then my mom, as a little girl, ended up really sick with I don't know the term that they had then, if they even had it, but she was born with a hole in her arm. And it was a rare condition at the time, and they could not treat it in Puerto Rico. And so some doctors at Columbia Presbyterian decided to take on the case, and they brought her. And so kind of a unique case. She was like the second, I think, child to have that type of open heart surgery. So that was the only reason she came here. And she kind of lived there like in convents and stuff because she had many surgeries. And they paid for it. So it was a unique situation. My grandmother was already here, and so she brought one of her cousins, my mom did, because she just needed somebody like that she knew, because at that time she didn't really know my grandmother. And they were the first to come, and they were in Harlem. And then my dad ended up in the South Bronx, and then they met. And then I came. And
And then you went back.
then we went back to Puerto Rico. My mom is from Caguas, and so that's kind of home for me. And that's when I do go to Puerto Rico, that's where I go. My dad's from San Sebastian. He's the youngest of 11, so I don't know a lot of them because a lot of them passed. And so, because he was the youngest, only a couple that I really got close to. But my mom's family is from Caguas from forever back. Like, I've traced my family tree, and they were in Caguas from the beginning. And so, I mean, I think even some of the towns are named after my family there, Flores. So it's like they're really entrenched there. So when I go there, that's where I feel like home. Like, I love to go there. I still go there, and there's no other feeling like it. Not even here. So yeah.
You said Flores, I turned my head quick to my little sheet.
Flores?
Uncle
Uh-huh.
Florito, who came from Flores, who
Oh yeah?
connected to the town. So we have more to talk to this.
Oh, we'll talk.
Well, I guess that prompts so I have this weird last name. I have two last names. Joseph knows it because I had him in school, so he knows he's Puerto Rican. Where do you get that last name? That's not Puerto Rican. So I have this. My dad's last name is Cartwright. It's Kotright. It sounds very German, but it's British. And so I'll tell the Cartwright side, these British, somehow some British merchant marines found their way to the Canary Islands. I don't know the years. But my father's father, my grandfather, Chevi, who was also Jose Cotray, was a merchant marine. I'm also finding out that merchant marines have children in lots of places. I don't know where he's had children. Every once in a while I find another Cartwright brother somewhere out there. He laid babies around a lot of places. But so he wound up traveling back and forth between Puerto Rico and everywhere else, and made some relations with someone and some people in Cape Verdean, and the Cape Verde Islands wound up coming back to PR, and that's where the Cartwrights got to PR from British, mixed with the Cape Verde Islands, and wound up in PR. So the last name Cartwright has like 5 or 6 different manifestations on the island. There's Catright, K-A-T, Catright, some accents, So around the island in Humacao is where he's from. There's where's another what's the name of El Barrio Chino, somewhere around there. I'm like, okay, all these different names I found written next to names. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like Joseph looking at ancestry, asking grandma for these things, people passing away, and we're looking through all this stuff. We're like, oh wow, there's history here. We gotta save this stuff. So my dad's side was a Cartwright. His mother was Paez, and they were both from Humacao. They came to New York around the 40s or 50s. She came because he left her doing his merchant marining, and she's like, I'm gonna go to New York with my sisters and brothers. They were already here. I don't know why they came, but she came, and they came to Spanish Harlem there on 112th and 2nd, and they stayed there, like just stayed there until my dad finally left. My mom's side is Gonzalez. They came also from Humacao. They came over, and her father was Pedro and Maria Ubiles. They came over in the 40s. Grandpa was a carpenter and sort of just helping farmers do their farming, and decided to come to New York to just find a better way. There was not a lot of money, wasn't making well, had the baby, the first baby, my mom, no, my mom's sister, and then sent my mom's sister and grandma over to Harlem, said, go get an apartment with family over there. I don't know who they connected with, but then he came over later, became a porter in the projects across the street from my father's side, the Wagner projects and Jefferson project across from each other, and then they met, and that's how they mixed the Cartwrights and Gonzalez. Yeah, it was fun to find all this stuff out, particularly. Unfortunately, my dad just passed away 4 months ago. We're still in mourning, but it was an opportunity to have lots of conversations. And I got a lot of people crying, sending texts like, hey, tell me this, tell me that. And they're just sending me more pictures, and it's beautiful, and find out more and more and more. So, I don't know. I just went off on this big long tangent of time and details, but without that, who are we, right?
Right.
Even if I don't know exactly who I know, there's a Norberta out there, there's a Frolito, there's a Pedro, all these beautiful names. And, so back to your story real quick. When I went to prep school, I said my last name is Cartwright Gonzalez. They're like, wait, you have two last names? I'm like, yes, because Cartwright doesn't sound Latino. So I'm going to bring Gonzalez with me so everybody knows.
Right.
But American
like,
style,
no.
they changed it to KG. And then I was like, I'm not a KG. That sounds like a DJ.
KG?
Yeah.
Really? Somebody
Cartwright Gonzalez.
KG is weird. Yeah.
What?
Well, one thing you said, interesting how like the migration from different places, when we start really looking at our ancestry is really interesting because I'm very much into genealogy and ancestry as well. So I too have done the tree, and it goes way back. But my grandfather was also from the Canary Islands, and so there is a big migration. Yes. So we'll have to talk. But there is a historical migration from the Canary Islands to Puerto Rico, which is something that I've been trying to learn more about because I know that he was born there, as was my great-grandfather. So were they from Spain originally? Were they from someplace else? Were they from the Canary Islands? I don't know. But
And if you do your research as well, whoever's done their DNA stuff, you'll probably see also Middle Eastern as well sometimes.
yeah.
The Muslims and were in Spain as well. And there was even Christians and Jewish people there as well. Also the Tainos, they migrated from South America and they came up into the Caribbean.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of Middle Eastern in my DNA. But I also attribute that to my grandfather because wherever he came from. He like yours, Jody, had children everywhere. Everywhere. Anyway.
Well,
Your
who
turn.
knows if we might have some relations here? Because first of all, I'm just like putting the puzzle pieces together. First of all, Vanessa, that you're mentioning a few minutes ago, you were talking about like being on Fordham. So I was like, oh my God, and little Vanessa was probably running around in Alexander's at the same time because I was on Kingsbridge and walking to Fordham Road to Alexander's like every other day. So that's that. But then now, Joe, you mentioning Jefferson Projects. So my parents' love story started out in Spanish Harlem by the Jefferson Project. So there's also possibilities, right? Again, seeing, where all the families congregate and like how connected, we may be even more than we think, like beyond this podcast. But and so I definitely feel, and I say it not with pride, but just to be transparent, I still feel I'm very ignorant about my history, and I'm doing the work now to learn more about it. There's definitely, it's unfortunate when that happens, but definitely elders in the family and key individuals that probably, coulda, woulda, shoulda been the best people to sit down and talk to and really get the word of mouth straight from them. So I kind of like try to think about and put bits and pieces together of things that I believe I heard and from them when I was a little kid, and then also, piecing together some of the stories that I know my mom and dad would tell time and time again. But in relation to my dad specifically, who was born in Puerto Rico, in San Juan, um, he was one of, let's see, there's a lot of sisters. He had 3 sisters and 2 brothers. So he was one of 6. And there was a time that he kind of was the head of household because his father had passed away before his mom, my grandmother, remarried, and so he had to grow up pretty quickly. So my stories that I remember very clearly with my dad, hearing him say it and other people share, he was very humble beginnings, would sell gum and fruit and candy, to try to earn some money to bring money home to his mom to take care of himself and his siblings. And, that's what prompted the move to New York. And I don't know, at least not yet, I don't know like who was the first one to kind of come to New York, to Spanish Harlem, and set roots so that everyone can originally, eventually transition over. But I know he came first, and then eventually, his mom was able to get out here, and his siblings, and it was again, just working hard and grinding to try to support his mom and his siblings. Factory work. He used to work in an eyeglass factory. He had his like toolbox and all these like little things to fix eyeglasses that I used to mess with when I was a kid. So that's how I knew what he was into back then. And then eventually, moving into more of the service industry and like hotels and stuff, which was very common. But he came over here, I want to say he was like 17 or 18 years old. So it was very early 50s. And my dad, again, talking about like our diversity in appearance as well, was a very light skin, had like, reddish curly hair, light eyes. And so, he always talked about being pegged as something else. Like, oh, he's Italian, he's Irish, he's this. But then when they realized that he didn't understand the lick of English, and then he was just like, because he picked up his English, along the way as best he could. So I know he definitely had those experiences of feeling as other. And something that was very unique to my dad too, and I don't know if you guys have heard this from some of your elders in your families. He left at 18 and never went back. And my dad passed on in 2011, and one of the things I was trying to get him to do before he transitioned was to take a trip with me. And at that point I hadn't really had much exposure to the island. I had gone once in my early 20s, and I didn't know how to travel. I didn't know how to kind of unpack things at that point. So I just kind of did a couple of touristy things, but I didn't really dig. And so I was trying to get him to go back with me, like, oh, we'll go see your sister. He did have his eldest sister out there for a very long time in Gaye, but he refused to go back. He was just like, my island is not what it used to be. I want to remember it the way it was when I was a kid. And I want to hold on to that. And it was almost like he didn't want to go back. And, he felt the loss, right? Which I think a lot of migrants will talk about, feeling that loss when you leave, even, if it's forced or if it's something that you feel is for the betterment of your family and it's something you need to do. So he felt that loss once, but he didn't want to feel it again in going back and seeing so much change and difference. So I always found that unique about my father. I was like, why are you being so stubborn? And I think sometimes I wasn't understanding his perspective, but I think now it kind of sits differently with me and I can understand that. But that's a little bit about his story. And then with my mom, she was born and raised in Spanish Harlem. Both her parents were born in Puerto Rico, exactly where I don't know yet. But my grandfather was a merchant marine as well. So he was, and my grandfather was very handsome.
That's
And
my
so
sister right there.
I know it could be because I'm like, I don't even know. I mean, I'm not trying to put the family business all up for blast, but I know there were like sometimes like, oh, he was away at sea for like months at a time. You never know, stuff happens. And so it's just like, you're making me want to dive into the ancestry DNA and be like, you know what? We might have some relatives in common at this point. But yeah, right, exactly. There goes that common thread. Be like, hey,
Yep.
like, But they eventually transitioned to New York as well for similar reasons. Again, just feeling it would be a better way of life. I know my grandmother was relatively young when she married my grandfather, so it was just feeling that upward mobility that was kind of touted if you came to the city. And my grandfather, once his merchant marine days were over, he never traveled back either. And then my grandmother, she was one that was very connected. And so stories I hear up until my mom was probably at her early 20s, my grandmother was making at least 2 trips out to Puerto Rico every year. So she was making sure to go back. And I think like all of us, there's always relatives that are on the island, but maybe we don't know them. And so I know that there's probably still some linkages out there. Definitely some cousins I know I have, from my dad's eldest sister who's also moved on at this point. But, I'm curious. I just like have all these questions, right? So it's like, I need to do the digging in the ancestry DNA because I'm curious about the tea that comes up there, but also tapping in further to the elders that are still remaining in my family. My grandmother's sister, my uncle, my aunt, and just really asking those questions and seeing how I can find out more. Because again, I think hearing the similarities in the stories it's a unifying factor that regardless whether, I was born in San Juan or, in the Bronx or somewhere else, it's that unifying factor that, keeps the culture, I think, strong and embracing the fact that there's also distinction and uniqueness, that's okay. So.
I hear an episode, genealogy and resistance, right? And bringing someone to sort of help us connect the dots because I could imagine a map of last names, a map of somewhere, so that we could take what we already know, the tools of ancestry, the things we know that we have this connectivity, and giving it real life, handheld, accessible links of places that people can empower themselves with the things we're talking about. Wow, there's a connection between the merchant marine community in Boricua and a conversation about the Canary Islands. We should all be talking about this together because we could all be cousins. Yo, let's figure that angle out. Like, that's how I'd love to take the gift of the energy that Joseph introduced me to and bringing this together to say it's relevant, this history, and it becomes more relevant the more you connect it, the more we find each other. I'm inspired to say that in my work with young people, the best thing I can describe to them is that the work I do, no matter the title or the place, is to find a piece of myself in you and allow you to find a piece of yourself in me. And because I am nothing but a scattered set of pieces of genes, right? I'm a culmination of all these scattered sets of things, and I got to find all those linkages. And it's that true journey of finding and actively, like Boricua is like you gave me a comment. Boricua is not a noun, it's an adjective. It's something you have to do to be, right? And continually do to be. Whatever that doing is what you find. You'll find a calling and a string and something to pull you closer to that next person, but just pull out the string. Pull each other closer, find that conversation, find that connectivity.